The movie is set in a dystopian world where humans coexist with various mythical creatures who follow a strict hierarchy. Some species, particularly humans and elves, are at the top of the pyramid and hold prestigious positions, whereas others, such as orcs, are confined to the most disadvantaged neighborhoods and subjected to widespread discrimination. The scene then cuts to L.A., where we meet a police officer named Daryl, who is out on the streets with his partner, Nick Jakoby, who's the world's first and only orc police officer. Jakoby then leaves his partner briefly alone to get a burrito, just as a hooded orc exits a convenience store. He's armed with a gun, but before Daryl can do anything, the hooded orc fires at him. In the next scene, Daryl wakes up from the nightmare, and it turns out he has finally recovered from the shooting and is ready to return to work. His wife worries about his safety and doesn't want him to go back to being a cop after what happened. But Daryl has no choice, as they are in financial debt, though he reassures her that he has only 5 years left until retirement. Not long after, Jakoby pulls up outside to pick up Daryl for work, and the two officers head off to work. On the way, Daryl scolds Jakoby for not covering him when he got shot, but Jakoby defends himself, saying he went to grab a burrito for Daryl, and it wasn't his fault. The duo then drives through Elf Town, which is a place full of high-class and snobbish elves. The scene then cuts to the locker room of the police station, where Daryl is picked on by his colleagues, Brown and Hicks, for tolerating his orc partner and not doing anything to get him kicked off the force. They also strongly believe that Jakoby deliberately didn't catch the perpetrator on the day of the shooting to protect his clan. Daryl says that even though he's annoyed with Jakoby, he can't do anything since the orc is his assigned partner. An officer named Pollard becomes particularly hostile to Daryl over his partner and even threatens to kill Jakoby if he approaches him. Meanwhile, Jakoby is outside the room, where he overhears everything and feels very bad. Later, all the officers gather for a meeting, during which Daryl and Jakoby are assigned to work together again. Daryl approaches his superior, Sergeant Ching, and asks her to assign the orc to someone else, but she claims it's not within her authority. Not long after, Daryl and Jakoby arrive in a neighborhood inhabited by poor humans and orc gangsters. The duo quickly arrives on the scene, where some police officers are beating up orcs while the family begs for mercy, making the scene horrifying. Daryl then asks Jakoby whether he is a cop or an orc first, as he doubts the orc's ability to fight his own kind if necessary. Jakoby affirms his loyalty, saying that ever since he was a kid, he wanted to be a cop and that his badge means more to him than anything. Just then, they get a dispatch call and drive up to a scene where they meet Officer Rodriguez. They watch as a madman named Serling waves a sword in the middle of the road and shouts complete nonsense. The madman says something about the Dark Lord's return before surrendering without hesitation. On the way to the station, Serling vomits all over the car and suddenly begins speaking to Jakoby in Orcish. He claims to have a message from an organization called Shield of Light and says that the prophecy has chosen Jakoby. He tells the orc to remember his traditions and also mentions that Daryl is lucky to have him. A confused Daryl doesn't understand and asks what he said, but Jakoby insists that it's all utter nonsense. Upon arriving at the station, Daryl begins cleaning up his vomit-filled car when he is approached by his superior, along with a man from the Internal Affairs Department. They suspect that Jakoby intentionally let the fellow tribesman go on the day Daryl was shot. According to Jakoby, he chased the shooter into an alley, but the man hit him and then escaped into a building using a staircase. However, the police discovered that the staircase was too high for the shooter to reach on his own, suggesting that Jakoby may have helped him. After saying this, they hand Daryl a recorder and instruct him to get Jakoby to confess so they can expose him. Daryl refuses to believe any of it and doesn't want to betray his partner, even though he finds him annoying, but his superior threatens his job, knowing he has a family to support and is in financial debt. With no other choice, Daryl reluctantly agrees to the plan and takes the recorder. Later, as Daryl and Jakoby are leaving, they notice a high-ranking elf named Candemir and his associate arriving at the station. Jakoby worries that they're here to arrest him, but Daryl reassures him that's not the case. The duo gets in the car, and Jakoby senses the stress in his partner and realizes something bad has happened at the station. He asks what it is, and Daryl tries to make him confess by mentioning how his daughter always speaks the truth after doing something wrong, and it makes her feel better. However, their conversation is abruptly interrupted when they receive a dispatch call. On the other hand, we see Candemir and his associate, who are part of the U.S. Department of Magic's Magic Task Force. They are interrogating Serling, who reveals that he is a member of a secret society called Shield of Light. Candemir then asks him about a group of renegade elves called Inferni, and shows them 2 pictures of the members. It turns out that Inferni is a terrorist organization wanted by the government, and they want to resurrect the Dark Lord, who was defeated 2,000 years ago by 9 races. Serling recognizes one of the pictures as Layla, who is the leader of Inferni. He reveals that to bring back the Dark Lord, one needs to collect 3 magic wands, but these wands can only be touched by special people called Bright, and if a normal human touches them with their bare hands, they will immediately explode. Layla is a Bright, meaning she can wield a wand without it destroying her. The officials learn that Layla is looking for her sister, Tika, so they decide to find her first, after which Layla will come to them herself. On the other hand, Daryl and Jakoby arrive at the scene following a dispatch call, which looks like an abandoned place, but as soon as the officers exit the vehicle, they are immediately shot at by someone, prompting them to take cover behind a car. A tense gunfight ensues between the two parties, but in the end, the officers manage to defeat the criminal. The duo then carefully head inside and are horrified to see numerous charred bodies and the dead body of the shooter who had been firing at them. Moments later, the officers come across a shocking sight: a woman with her hands up, pinned to the wall by colored roots emerging from her body. This terrifies them, and they immediately call for reinforcements, suspecting that a Bright may have been here earlier and caused all the havoc. Just then, they hear a noise nearby and spot a girl who quickly rushes to the corridors. The officers immediately follow the girl and manage to capture her, but she turns out to have a weapon, which she uses to destroy a nearby car. The duo then points their guns at her and asks who she is and what she's doing here. The girl suddenly begins speaking in Elvish, and the officers are shocked to see that the weapon she's holding is a magic wand. She reveals that her name is Tika and asks them to protect her and the wand, as someone evil is coming after her. Daryl is left confused, but luckily Jakoby, who studied some Elvish in high school, manages to understand her. Not long after, Brown, Ching, Pollard, and Hicks arrive, and Daryl explains everything that happened. He also shows them the magic wand, and the officers can't take their eyes off it. Daryl suggests they should call their superiors, but the officers disagree and reveal that they plan to use the wand, which can grant any wish in the world. The cops also decide to kill Jakoby, who is outside guarding Tika. They urge Daryl to shoot him, which he obviously refuses, but they insist that they're going to kill the orc anyway and threaten to fire Daryl. Hearing this, the poor guy has no choice but to agree to the plan. While leaving, Daryl calls his wife and urges her to take their daughter and leave town immediately. After that, he goes to confront Jakoby, while the other cops inside are seen planning to kill Daryl as well. Daryl then calls Jakoby Pigface and points a gun at him, demanding to know why he let the shooter escape that day. At gunpoint, Jakoby finally admits that he did let him go, but it was because he lost the shooter in a crowd. He thought he had cornered the culprit in an alley, but it was just a young boy spray painting the side of a building. Jakoby knew that the human officers would have killed the kid on the spot, so he let him get away on the staircase. Upon hearing this, Daryl is stunned, and at the same time, the corrupt officers arrive outside to see if he has the guts to shoot his partner. But in a shocking twist, Daryl suddenly turns and shoots all 4 officers instead, instantly leading to their deaths. This leaves Jakoby horrified, and he tries to arrest Daryl, but the latter explains that these officers were corrupt and wanted to kill them both. Regardless, Jakoby insists that he must do his duty and reports a call to the station, simply saying 4 cops have been shot dead and 1 is alive. Next, Jakoby tries to arrest his partner, but they are interrupted by a gang of Mexican gangsters led by a wheelchair-bound man named Poison. It turns out they witnessed the earlier shooting and have also learned about the magic wand. Poison now demands the wand for them, as he wants to use it to heal his legs and finally walk again. Regardless, the officers refuse and quickly get into the car with Tika, trying to drive away. The gangsters relentlessly shoot at their car, but the cops are saved by the armored glass. However, the Mexican thugs do not let them go easily, as the car is already rammed by a jeep with a couple of shooters wielding machine guns. However, when the shotgun runs out of ammo, Daryl uses a stun gun to incapacitate the jeep driver and finally shakes off their pursuers. Tika then suddenly pleads with the officers to return to the house where they found her, but they don't understand her. All of a sudden, the magic wand floats by itself and causes the car to slam into an invisible barrier. On the other hand, Candemir and his associate sense the magic wand's power and set off to find it. At the same time, Layla and her minions arrive at the house where it all began. The girl who had been trapped in the wall turns out to still be alive, and Layla interrogates her. The girl reveals how Tika betrayed them and took the magic wand, which infuriates Layla. She immediately kills the girl and then finishes off Pollard, who turns out to still be alive, but injured. Just then, Layla notices that they are being watched by neighbors from the house across the street and decides to visit them for interrogation. Soon they visit the family, pretending to be authorities, and demand to know what happened in the next building. The family reveals everything about how 1 cop shot the other 4, the presence of the Mexican gangsters, and the magic wand. After getting the information, Layla and her minions slaughter the family and finally leave the house. Elsewhere, Tika informs the officers that the wand actually belongs to Layla and has a spell bound to it, so it cannot stay far from its owner. They begin discussing their next moves when all of a sudden the gangsters return and start attacking them, leading to an intense shootout. While escaping, Jakoby drops the wand, and when one of the thugs picks it up, it explodes and kills many people. Jakoby quickly grabs the wand again with a cloth, and they all flee the scene. Elsewhere, Candemir arrives at the house where it all started and notices the dead girl attached to a wall, which makes him realize that Layla has been here. Candemir has been hunting the leader of the Inferni for 20 years, so he knows that she is vulnerable without her wand, and now it's the right time to destroy her. Meanwhile, Daryl and Jakoby ditch their police uniforms and change into civilian clothes before entering a strip club to hide. Unfortunately, it doesn't take long for the Mexican gang to track them down and start a fight. Poison demands they hand over the wand and threatens to kill all 3 of them if they refuse. A gunfight breaks out and Tika warns them that something terrible is coming. Seconds later, Layla storms into the club with her thugs, and the elves annihilate the entire Mexican gang in a matter of seconds. Several police officers also arrive at that moment, but Layla eliminates them as well. Amid the chaos, our heroes manage to escape the place, and Daryl calls his old friend Rodriguez for help. Rodriguez arrives soon after, but immediately points a gun at them, as he knows that Daryl killed 4 police officers. Daryl tries to explain what really happened, but Rodriguez contacts Candemir and tells him everything. Daryl then speaks with Candemir, who promises that if he hands over the magic wand, there won't be any charges against him or his partner. But just then, the Inferni wiretap their conversation and cut off their communications. Rodriguez then puts both officers in handcuffs, boasting that that Jakoby will take the blame for the dead cops, but before he can act further, he is suddenly gunned down by the Inferni, prompting the trio to quickly run away from there, but unfortunately, they are soon surrounded by a gang of massive orcs, who immediately capture them and take them to their base. There, the orc leader, Dorgu, calls Jakoby a disgrace to their kind and demands that he hand over the wand. Jakoby obviously refuses, so Dorgu orders his son to shoot and kill him. Shockingly, the boy refuses, and it is revealed that he is the same kid Jakoby spared on the day Daryl was shot. Upon hearing this, Dorgu sends his son away and then shoots Jakoby and throws his body into a pit. Dorgu then tries to end Ward's life, but Tika suddenly draws the wand and invokes a spell that resurrects Jakoby, revealing that she is also a bright. The revelation stuns everyone, and the orcs finally choose to let them go unharmed. However, the effort drains Tika so much that she can no longer stand, forcing Daryl to lift her into his arms and carry her away from the scene. Afterward, Tika reveals the truth to the officers that Inferni is planning to resurrect the Dark Lord, and she is also a member. But she escaped, so Layla sent a girl to kill her, but Tika overpowered her and stole the wand. However, using its power has begun to drain her and is slowly killing her. She tells them that only the Shield of Light can save her, and for that, she must reach the ancient pool of magic hidden in the very house where it all began. Upon hearing this, the duo immediately heads to the house, but as expected, Layla and her minions are already waiting. They had been hiding in the walls and waste no time attacking our heroes. However, Jakoby, now stronger after being revived, manages to take out most of them and even bombs them. At this moment, Layla tries to attack Tika and Daryl, leading to an intense battle between them. She turns out to be extremely skilled, but Daryl manages to hold her off after several attempts. Jakoby then shoots her multiple times with his shotgun and finally finishes her. Next, Daryl carries Tika and lowers her into the magical pool. At the same time, Layla, who turns out to be incredibly powerful, slowly revives. She quickly wraps a thread around Jakoby's neck and pushes him off the balcony, leaving him hanging. Layla then moves to the pool and retrieves her wand before blasting Daryl out of the water. Afterward, she pulls her sister from the pool and pleads with her to return and join the Inferni. But Tika refuses, and in that moment, Jakoby shoots the wand out of Layla's hand. However, Jakoby soon runs out of bullets, so Daryl takes a daring risk and grabs the wand. To everyone's shock, it doesn't explode, revealing that he is also a bright. Tika quickly teaches him a combat spell, and he repeats the phrase before striking Layla, killing her instantly. The attack sets off a massive explosion just as the authorities arrive outside. Daryl and Jakoby desperately search for Tika, but she vanishes into thin air, leaving them distraught. The building is now on fire, and Jakoby somehow escapes the flames, but when he can't find his friend on the street, he immediately goes back inside. The Super Orc once again shows his true strength and carries his wounded friend outside, earning the respect of everyone around. Sometime later, Daryl wakes up in the hospital next to Jakoby, and soon Candemir and his associate arrive to interrogate them. Jakoby begins to panic and tells them everything that happened, even though they didn't ask anything. But Daryl denies that there were any elves or magic wands involved and says that a gang of criminals killed the cops. The officials thus decide to go with this story even though they know it's not true. The movie concludes with Daryl and Jakoby receiving awards for their heroism, and they notice Tika in the crowd who is still alive and smiling at them. Please subscribe, leave a like and comment, and don't forget to check out this one too.